flood, we shared our stories each week. We had an open time of sharing. And so today I actually thought of stepping aside entirely, not preaching at all, and just giving you a chance to share. But, you know, we've seen God in a lot of places this year. And a friend of mine quoted this passage in Revelations for me a few months back, and I thought, I can't pass up the opportunity. I've never preached on Revelations before. It's kind of a controversial book. Some think it's written by John, the author of the Gospel of John, while he was exiled on an island in Patmos, and others say absolutely not. The timing and the language don't fit. It's the wrong John. It's a different John. And so I thought, why have I never preached on Revelations? Maybe it's too controversial. Maybe it's too racy or too scary with all the images. And then I thought, no, that's usually right up my alley, that kind of stuff.
Come on.
So, upon thinking about it more, I decided maybe I'm just uncomfortable with the way that some people and some Christians are so focused on the end of times, on the apocalypse, on what's left to come after this world ends. I think it may be more important for me in my life now to focus on today and the choices I have to make and the consequences thereof, rather than some celestial reckoning day. But anniversaries and commemorations are a special opportunity. They're a time that we can look back to 1 year ago, where we were and how we survived, and they're a time that we can look forward and look ahead. And that's exactly what apocalyptic literature is all about. Since the Hebrews were released from slavery, as Sam mentioned this morning, and probably long before that, people have been wondering what's next in life. What's going to happen from here? And especially when times are rough, after times of personal trauma or natural disaster, we need a glimpse of some bright future in order to survive the stress and the grief and the loss of today. I've spoken with many people this week, and whether they were positive or negative, there was an awful lot of anxiety in town. There was an awful lot of anxious energy. And some people aren't where they thought they would be 1 year after the flood. For some people, the town or their homes are not restored, and they're not sure that they ever will be. I even had coffee with a friend last week from Louisiana, and she and I were talking about resurrection and death. And she reminded me that after Jesus was resurrected, even his closest friends didn't recognize him. That after a death, when there is a new life and a new beginning, it sometimes doesn't look exactly the way it did before. It sometimes doesn't look or feel exactly like we think it should. And she told me that in Louisiana, in the French Quarter, there was a section where the levee broke, and I think she said the 9th quarter, and it flooded. It changed the landscape of that part of the town. And the people who had to evacuate didn't come home. Even 10 years later, they're not home. But there's a whole new section of people that moved into that neighborhood, and they were ethnically Vietnamese, because that section of New Orleans now looks more like the rice paddies in the fields that they were familiar with from their home country. So she said when she's in New Orleans now and she goes out to the grocery store, there's all kinds of fresh Vietnamese produce and rice and things that she's never heard of. It's awkward, it feels funny, but it is a beginning. It is new life and new growth, a resurrection, if you will, just not a resurrection of exactly that which was before. A friend reminded me that a pastor's role in disaster is to inspire or to bring about hope, to encourage people to feel hope, but that it's not our jobs to instill a sense of false hope. And as I've been looking around the town and the community and the state, to me, I've heard a lot of speeches that seem to not be based in reality. It's hard for us to recognize that after a disaster, not everyone will come home. Not everyone wants to come home. Some people have moved on and made their lives in other places, and I can attest to the fact that new people are moving to town all the time. I meet new neighbors in the coffee shops, I'm sure you have as well. There is regrowth, there is resurrection. It's just a little different. So if we can never go home again, where do we go from here? Today's scripture from Revelation uses old and familiar imagery to describe a new normal, or a new abnormal, as the MC said yesterday at the Viva Lyons event. This little town was never normal before the flood, so why should we be striving for normal now? I liked it. We should seek our new abnormal. And so in today's scripture you find a crystal clear river of life. It's not muddy. It's not filled with rocks and flood debris. It's a crystal clear river running through the middle of the street. And many of us remember the way the rivers ran through the streets a year ago. This is a different vision though. This is clear, life-giving water. And this river splits the city, possibly into 2 islands or more, we don't really know. But there are trees of life-bearing fruit on either side of the riverbanks. It doesn't matter which neighborhood you're from, which side of the tracks you're from, where you live, on which island you land. There's enough fruit, there's enough produce, reproducing all the time to feed you, to nourish you, and to restore you. The tree of life is a familiar image, also from Genesis. That's what got Adam and Eve kicked out of the garden, if you'll remember. The knowledge of good and evil, the tree of life and the tree of knowledge. But now God comes face to face with us again with the tree of life. And it's not planted in a garden, it's planted in a city. This shows that we can't ever go backwards. Adam and Eve couldn't return to the garden, but they built a city. And in that city, in a city not unlike where we reside today, there are trees of life that are bearing fruit. And God is still with us. Now that we know evil and we've experienced good, we have a new abnormal in our city. And this time the tree brings us back together with God, not separating us from God. It nourishes us, and its leaves are to be used for the healing of the nations. I love that image. It reminds me of all kinds of ancient herbal medicines and remedies. And after disaster, that's the kind of healing that we need. The healing that comes from God's tree of life. We need leaves of hope that connect us with the tree. Healing reminders that God is always with us. And if we can recreate while we remember what happened last year, we can be remembered to God and to our own faith. It's not about the past. Even on this one-year commemoration weekend, it's not even about the future, which we know will be different, somehow filled with both darkness and light. But it's about the present, right now. The choices we make each week, each day, each moment, the choices to treat ourselves and our neighbors with loving kindness or not, to reach out and to help rebuild homes and lives or not, to speak words of hope, not bringing false hope, no empty promises, but words of true hope or not, to sometimes say the tough things that reality makes clear, though no one wants to hear them. This passage today is a vision of a new Jerusalem, a new beginning, and it ends with the face of God shining on all of us like the bright sun, with peace and total union with the divine, connection and presence. In the Gospel of John, there's a verse in chapter 7, verse 37 and 38. On the last day of the festival, the great day, while Jesus was standing there, he cried out, "Let anyone who is thirsty come to me, and let the one who believes in me drink. As the scripture has said, out of the believer's heart shall flow rivers of living water." Out of the believer's heart shall flow rivers of living water. We're not there yet. We're 1 year down and many more to go. But as we continue to recover from this flood, let us all remember ourselves to God. Let us choose to believe, even the tiniest shred of belief that we can possibly muster, so that we can become a river of life flowing into this community. I'd like to invite Danny now to come and grace us with his music and his words. Thank you.